Hi guys, and welcome to Fix Savers. In today's video we're going to be doing a complete pool table installation. The whole thing from the base right through to the cloth, the rails, the whole lot. We have a lot to do, so let's get it started. Okay, so first things first, before we start the construction of the pool table, is to calculate the position of the pool table within the room. So obviously we need to put this together and then make sure it's in the right place, because once you put those slates on it, it will be immovable. So that's the first thing we're going to do, is make sure we get it in the right spot. Now the exact calculations for the positioning of your table is obviously going to vary depending on the size of your table and of course the measurements of your particular room. So it's going to be slightly different for every person watching this video. So to calculate the center position of your pool table, what you can do is you can take the measurement of the actual playing surface. Remember, the playing surface is not necessarily the same size as your slate or your pool table size. I will put a quick graph on screen for you showing some of the most common playing size surfaces. But you can take half of that measurement, which would be dead center of the table, add to that your length of your cue, which for most people watching will be a standard pool cue, which is 58 inches. And ideally, if you've got space, you want to add an extra couple of inches wiggle room on the end of that as well. So that would be the measurement, that would be your kind of minimum measurement away from the wall in one direction, and then obviously do that in the other directions as well. So it's all going to be based upon measuring away from the wall and getting yourself a little spot that you can measure on the floor, as we've done here. We've marked out the dead center where we actually want this pool table to be, and that's the center of the playing surface. So this little quick bit of preparation of measuring out the correct position of the center of the table is going to be invaluable, because remember, when you actually construct the pool table, as soon as you put those slates on it, it can't be moved for two reasons. It will be physically too heavy is the main one, and secondly, if you try moving your pool table after it's been correctly set up, you're likely to crack the joints on the slate. So once you've got it in position, it's intended not to be moved. So the preparation is the key. Okay, so we've got our position marked in the center of the floor. Now before we actually start the construction, another thing you might want to do is you're likely going to be wanting to put a pool table light above your pool table once it's constructed. This is the ideal opportunity to transfer that mark that you just made on the floor up to the ceiling. To do that, what you're going to use is a plumb line. So once you're happy that you've got it aligned with the mark on the floor, you're going to transfer that mark up onto the ceiling. So we know that would be the dead center of the pool table. So when you come to hang your light, you've got a central point to work from. The other thing to think about is the orientation of the pool table, i.e. which side of the pool table do you want to break from, because this is going to make a difference as to how you set your pool table up and which direction you set your pool table up. On a standard pool table you have what's called a head rail. This is one of the end rails, and usually you'll find that one of them will have a logo on it, and the logo tends to be the head rail. So this is the end of the pool table from which you're going to break. So when you set the orientation of your pool table, hopefully when you dismantle your pool table, if you did it yourself, you've marked everything up very, very carefully, and you might have marked up the different corners, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a clockwise or anti-clockwise direction, however you want it to go, and you can correspond those when you come and put this back together. That's one important thing to remember, is where do you want your head rail to be, and which dictates which side you're going to break from. So we've marked out on the floor the approximate position of the 6 pockets of the pool table. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, which for us is going in a clockwise direction, because that is how we dismantled the table. And this will help us when we put the pool table back together, because when we deconstructed the pool table, we very carefully marked every section with a small piece of masking tape, numbering them alongside the corresponding pockets. So on this particular pool table, we have a little wooden bracket, and inside the wooden bracket we've got these little threaded metal sockets. Yours might be a little bit different to this. You might have a metal bracket, but the principle will be exactly the same. And now on these, what we have is we actually have holes on the inside of the leg. Just here you can see that they're offset, and these are going to line up with these two here. Again, if you have a metal bracket on the inside of your pool table, and you might also have a solid leg rather than a hollow type, as we have on this Brunswick table, it'll be exactly the same principle. You'll have a metal bracket in which you put the bolts through, as opposed to this mounted plywood section, and the leg might well have a pin that comes up through the centre of that metal bracket. But the principle of attaching the corners is exactly the same. It will just be a bolt together. At this stage, what you want to do is get them so they're almost done up. They still have a little bit of play in them. You don't want to do them up too tight, because we're going to adjust it as required when we move it upright. So we've now got one of the sides set up with both feet, and next we're going to set up one of the ends with the third leg. Okay, so we now have 2 sides and 3 legs set up. So now it's time to put the 4th leg in place and then attach the remaining 2 sides. Next, be sure to check your feet. You see this one's got a gap on this side, which is not quite level. Just lift the table up a little bit. That's it. Make sure it's nice and square. Once you've got all 4 legs definitely flat on the floor and you're happy with it, it's time to tighten up the bolts. So to tighten these, if it's a used pool table, you'll have the kind of the previous scar, if you like, that's left in the wood where the washer sat before. So when you tighten them up, if you ensure that the washer ends up in the same position, you know you're going to be in a good point to start. Get these nice and snug. Don't over tighten them, don't try and snap it, but you do want to get it nice and tight and snug in there. So next what we're going to do is we're just going to add some string to the dead centre of the table in both directions, and we use the plumb line just to ensure that we meet our centre mark on the floor down there. So what you need to do is you need to, obviously we've got this cutout which is dead central for us, so I can just measure this cutout and put a mark in the centre of that. If you don't have this little cutout, which you should have, but if you haven't, what you can do is you can just measure the distance from one end to the other end, divide that in half and put your mark in the centre accordingly. So what we've done is we've gone around and we've wrapped this string around the outside of the pool table, dead centres on the 4 sides. So this cross dead central in the middle of here, what we need to do is we need to try and make sure that's going to line up with our little cross down on the floor there. So once again, to allow us to do that, we're just going to drop a plumb line down. You've got to be careful when you do this, because when you drop that plumb line down, it's very easy to start accidentally pushing this out of the way, and obviously that will give you an inaccurate reading. So you've kind of got to be careful not to touch the string, but get it as close as you can and try and align it, and then you can move the whole table as required. Okay, so I have my the tip of my plumb line, so my centre line on the floor, so I can see I've got a little gap here, so I need to move the pool table this way. I have a little gap here, so I need to move it that way. So we'll do that now and try it again. And in combination with using the plumb line to ensure that the centre of the table matches, of course you want to make sure that the table is square in relation to the room. So I know what the distance is from my wall to the centre of the mark there. So what we need to do is take that measurement again from the wall to the centre mark of your actual table here, and ensure that that matches on both ends the measurement that we have in the centre. That will ensure that it's square in relation to the room. Okay, so we've measured everything up, we've double checked it, we've checked that the plumb line is direct centre between the pink string that we've attached to the table and our mark on the floor. We're happy with that, and we've also measured from the centre lines on both ends to the wall, both ends of the table back to the wall, so we've ensured that it's square in relation to the walls as well. We only have one wall to go from in this particular installation. You'll likely have 2, or depending on the size of your room, you might want to do all 4, in which case pick 2 walls to measure from. So that would be a side wall and an end wall. Measure from those from the centre points of the table where you've marked to those walls, and that will ensure that you get it 100% square. Now we've got it square, and before we start levelling up, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around with some masking tape and mark out the position of these feet, so I know the exact position of these, just in case we nudge it a little bit when we're levelling it up. Okay, so now what we need to do is start levelling up the table, and the first thing we need to identify is which is the highest point of the 4 legs, because what we're going to do is we're going to level up the rest of the legs to that one that's already set at the highest point. So for example, we're close to level here, but I actually have to lift this end of the spirit level up a little bit, only a few millimetres, to get that bang on. So that's telling me that the leg on this side is obviously higher than the leg on that side. The leg on this side needs to come up to match the height of that one. So in this direction, that's the highest leg so far. So I've come around to the opposite end. This is our head of the table. Okay, so yeah, I have to lift this side a little bit to get it to align, which is telling me that this one is higher than this one. And we already know that the one in the opposite corner just over there is higher than this one here, and this one here is lower than this one here, so everything's pointing towards that one as being our highest point. So we now have to level up the other 3 legs to match the height of the highest leg. So a quick tip for you when you're leveling this up, obviously we're trying to get our bubble dead central in the little display window here, but rather than try and lifting it up, taking it out, lifting it up, what you can do is you can take your shim, start with the thinnest one, and when you do this, try and make sure it's level with where it's actually going to be in relation to the centre of your foot. So obviously if you move this up, it will create a bigger gap here, if that makes any sense. So where you place that is going to be the actual placement of where it would be under the foot. And then put that under there, check your level again, and then keep adjusting it as necessary, either with thicker shims or multiple shims or different types of shims, until you get it so you're 100% happy with it. And then you can literally just transfer that directly under the foot and you're good to go. Okay, so we've now got our frame level and we're happy with it, ready to proceed. It takes a little bit of fiddling around. You might have to go backwards and forwards and fine tune it a little bit until you get it 100%. Just take your time and remember to always work from your highest point outwards. So once you've got your central frame in, it's always a good idea just to test the level, make sure that they're nice and flush across the top. Okay, so as we can see, we have our slates on the table. A couple of important tips to go over. If you're unsure of the positioning of the slates on the table, i.e. you didn't mark them before you remove them, that's not a problem. What you want to do is put only the center one on first and then measure up. So imagining for a second this slate right here doesn't exist, we've only put on the center slate and we want to get this centrally positioned in relation to the frame. What you want to do is go around and measure the edge just here over to the opposite corner of the same slate right here, measure that as well, make sure that matches. And then of course we're going to go over to the other side of the slate just in here, measure that, make sure that matches, measure that, make sure it matches. Also you can move the whole slate backwards or forwards as you need to get it centered in that direction. And we want to ensure that our center slate is centered on the table in this direction. We've already done it in this direction, but now we want to do it in this direction. All you need to do is you need to measure from the side of your slate to the end of your wooden frame, so obviously we can't quite see because we do have the slate on top. Just measure from there to the edge of the wooden frame and then compare that to the opposite side, and then obviously you can adjust that that center slate as possible, as required. But you want to ensure that this center slate right here is dead central in relation to the wooden frame before you install the outer slates. Okay, so we're now happy that the center slate is centered in relation to the base frame. So what we're going to do at this stage, we're not going to worry about getting the level correct just yet. What we're going to do is actually put the screws in. We're not going to tighten them up as tight as they'll go, but we'll put them in fairly snug. The 4 screws that are in the center slate. Now when I'm putting these screws into holes that I know already exist, I prefer to do it manually rather than with the electric screwdriver, just so you can kind of get a feel for what's happening and that it is actually tightening up. What can happen if this screw's gone into the same hole, you know, the table's been dismantled a few times over the years, then the screw might not bite into the wood, and so you'll be doing this and it won't actually tighten up, it will just keep spinning and keep spinning, in which case you want to use a longer screw, or you're going to have to look at possibly doing something to the hole to thicken it out. So it's a good idea, rather than get straight in there with the electric screwdriver, to kind of use a manual one, because you can kind of have a feel for what's actually happening as that screw goes down. So we're almost at the stage where we're going to want to butt up the outer slates to our centre one, which is now fixed in position. But before we do that, there's a couple of important things that we've got to think about. So the next stage, before we close the joint up on these slates, is we want to give them a bit of a clean up. We can see we've got the remnants of the old beeswax and stuff still in there. So what we'll try and do is get rid of as much of this as we can. So now we can move on, and we're ready to butt the outer slates into the centre one. We want to make sure we get these nice and tight. When you butt it together, you have to make sure that the size of the gap that you've got is fairly uniform all the way across the gap, and hopefully when you put the screws in, if it's a table that's been used before, yeah, you see that one's actually found its previous hole, so that's good. You know that's in exactly the same location it was before. So now just go around and again tighten all these screws up. Don't over tighten them, just get them so that they're just snug. Perfect. So at this stage we've got all 3 slates and they're all screwed down, not amazingly tight, just tight enough to hold them in situ. And what we're going to do is looking at levelling the slates. Now we're going to be using just standard spirit levels. We've got a 6 foot one here, we've got a 2 foot one there, and we've got a couple of others that we can draw in if we need to. You can use kind of machinist levels for this, which are little kind of 12-inch ones, super accurate, also kind of expensive, and most people watching these probably haven't got those at home. So what we're going to do is we're going to level this up using hopefully something that you've got and you've got easy access to. If you haven't got one of these, you should be able to borrow one quite easily. They're very common. So first of all, let's get a feel for what we're facing. So if we put that across the slate, what this is going to do is this is going to show us whether we've got a raised centre or a lowered centre, if that makes any sense. So here's the centre of the spirit level. You can see we've got quite a big gap there. As you follow that along to the side over here, we go across the slate joint just here, and then the gap starts to disappear, and obviously it will disappear completely as we get towards the end of the spirit level. So this tells us that this centre slate is sitting lower than our two outer slates. To bring this level so that the whole thing will match this spirit level, obviously this centre slate needs to come up a little bit. So a useful tool for levelling up the slates is to use these wooden shims. These are available from any kind of decent hardware store. So I'm going to start by raising this section of the two slates here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to slacken off both screws on either side of the joint. So here's our slate joint, and this is the section that we want to raise. We can see above it this big gap right in here, and that's what we're going to try and get rid of. So I'm going to place my wedge just in around that section there, and then just tap the wedge in, and as you slowly tap that in, you get slightly deeper and deeper. This gap in here should slowly start to decrease. So next I'm just going to place one on the, I don't want to go too much in one lift, so I'm going to go the other side and start bringing the slate up a little bit on the other side of the joint as well. And once you're at a point where you think that you're happy, just zip these back down. So we've just brought this up to level, or just under level. Don't bring it up too much because we know that we're quite a long way out. So I'm going to move over to the other side and just repeat that, start bringing this up, and then I'll bring this one up to the full level, and then I can go back and double check that one. And so what you're trying to do is just to level these up so you're not getting that daylight showing through anymore. You can see we've closed that gap up. You can't see my finger from the back at all now, and you want to make sure that they're nice and flush. Another little trick you can do just to make sure that there's no edge there is just to grab one of your little wedges and try it in both directions. Obviously if you've got one that's slightly higher than the other, it will catch. So here's our level after levelling. Compare that to before. You can see my finger running across the bottom. You can now see no light running through it. As you go towards the ends, no light going through in either direction. So you know that these three in relation to one another are nice and flat and level. Okay, so we now have our three slates so that they're running nice and flat in relation to one another in this direction. So now you want to actually take the reading off of the level. Now thankfully we've managed to get ours absolutely bang on, so I'm happy with that. But let's say for example you were showing, when you did your level, you were showing that it actually needed raising on this corner here. So then what you could do is you come to this side, put a little shim in the end and tap it in just a little bit. Move this across a little bit further. It must still cross over onto the final piece of slate, and tap that in until you get a nice level that you're happy with. Then put this back to the centre, and obviously this will throw off this level again. So you slacken off these screws, do that, so you close the gap underneath, tighten those up, back to this one, slack those off, tap those in, bring that back up, so again you've got it nice and flat. Then you've got it running a little bit higher on that end that it needed, but still remaining flat across the three. Okay, so next we turn the spirit level through 90 degrees, and we're going to measure the level of the table in this direction. And what you want to do is you want to do it on the kind of end of each slate section. So here I can see that I'm looking very level, which is nice. I'm just going to move that down to this side of the first slate, and then I'm going to move to the other side of the joint. And I'm going to repeat that, obviously this side, and then at the end. Okay, so we've leveled this up and we're happy with it. We were very lucky as we were taking the level in this direction. We managed to get it absolutely perfect, so we're happy with that. However, when you come to take this level yourself, you might find that it's not perfect. You may see that one side needs to be raised up. If you need to do that, it's not a problem. All you've got to do is put wedges in, and usually it will show you that you need to raise the whole of one side up rather than, because if it's saying that the slates need to be raised differently, then obviously they're not flat in relation to one another. But assuming that they are flat in relation to one another, then if it's telling you anything, it would tell you that all three slates are sloping in one direction, so you'd want to bring it up on one side. Once you've done that, you're going to need to take your box level once again, your spirit level, turn it around 90 degrees, put it between your three slates, and just make sure that you're not seeing any daylight and that they are still nice and flat in relation to one another, because obviously you will just have adjusted that. So that's how you do that, should you need to. Okay, so we're at the stage now where we're level and we're happy with everything. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go around and tighten up the screws, make sure they're all tightened up to full tightness now, and then I'm going to go around, I'm going to double check everything again. It only takes 5 minutes, and if you're going to do it, now's the time to do it. So I'm going to tighten them all up, I'm just going to double check everything's good, and if so, then we can move on. Okay, another stage, and again this is completely optional. If you've got these nice kind of hard plastic packing wedges like we've got here, what you can do is you can put this in next to your wooden shim. The wooden shim may compact a little bit over time, because obviously it's a fairly soft material and the slates are very, very heavy. Whereas if you can put one of these in next to it, as long as you're not forcing it in, yeah, you want to find something that just fits in nice and snug. And just sit that next to your wooden shim, and then it's just a backup really. If this wooden shim should ever compact over time, you've got a nice plastic shim here which won't compact, and that will start to take the weight as soon as this compacts, if it ever does. So it's 100% optional and just a little backup. So if you're going to be looking at sealing your slates using the beeswax method, there's a few things that you're going to need. First of all, obviously, is the beeswax itself. And when you come to buy your beeswax, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You just need to make sure that it's definitely 100% beeswax. You can buy it quite easily from places like Amazon, and you'll find very often it's referred to as a cosmetic grade beeswax. That's absolutely fine. As long as it's 100% beeswax, that's perfect. And you usually see that often it's like things like triple filtered. All that's good. As long as it's 100% beeswax, you can't really go too far wrong. Ideally, not essential, if you've got some kind of tongs or something that you can hold the beeswax with, and that'll enable you to obviously keep your hand further from the flame, just for safety. So what you need to do first of all is just heat up the old joint. The reason being, especially if it's got beeswax remnants as this has, this will help just to start to melt this beeswax. A little bit will start to go in, and you might even burn off a little bit of the old stuff as well. So just going to give that a bit of a tidy with the blowtorch before we apply the fresh beeswax. So next we're going to look at applying the new beeswax to the joint here. Remember, when you come to the end here, you don't need to go right to the edge of the table. That's actually far closer than it needs to be. Remember your rails here, you just need to ensure that it's sealed under your rails. So to about this level here will be absolutely perfect. About a couple of inches from the end, perfect. You don't need to run it straight off the end. Move quite quickly, just go in with your scraper and do this before it dries. Scrape off the excess. You don't need to come right to the edge of the table, you just need to get it so it's sealed underneath the rails. And you just want to give it a good feel all the way along. It should be kind of flat. I can see I've got a little bit of excess just in here. If you can feel that it's thicker, then now's the time, whilst there's still a tiny bit of warmth in it, just to run it over again. This is when you want to get that wax whilst it's got this slightly yellowy colour starting to appear. So straight away, just nice and hard and firm. So just go over your joint. And just, it should feel really smooth, almost like glass. If there's anywhere you're not happy with, you can always apply a little bit more beeswax over that kind of area, and then scrape that area again and get it to a point where you're 100% happy. Okay, so we're ready to unfold the cloth and see what we've got. What we want to do before you place it on the table is just give it a bit of a sweep. The cloth can have little bits of cotton material on it, so we're just going to sweep it across the face of the slates. Just get it centered on your table so you know what kind of length you've got to work with before you start. Good idea as well before you start. So we're going to be working on the ends. So on the ends, it's worth marking the approximate centre on the timber as well. So next, you want to come to your head of the table. Well, one of the ends, doesn't really matter too much which. And I'm just going to pull that down. So I haven't got an amazing amount of material. Sometimes you get a cloth and you've got quite a lot of overhang. I just want to pull that down so that it's flush with the bottom of the wood. So first thing we're going to do is just going to fold the cloth down a little bit. We're going to put two staples next to one another just in the centre right here. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take the cloth and we're going to stretch it directly sideways, not diagonally. You're going to pull it directly sideways, get a nice amount of stretch on it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put a staple in approximately about 6 inches from the end. We're not going to staple right up to the end at this stage. We're going to leave a nice 6-inch gap there. And then come to the other corner and repeat the process. Remember, you're pulling directly sideways, so you're not trying to get any more overhang here. You're not pulling it diagonally, you're pulling it directly sideways. So nice tension, nice and tight, about 6 inches from your corner, and then again fill in the gap. So next, come to the opposite end of the table. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab this cloth, we're going to stretch it, pull it down, again nice and tight. I'm going to get a couple of holding staples in the centre here. So now you want to come in just past your 6-inch mark, approximated. And what you're going to do is you're going to pull this towards you so that it's got tension this way, and then you're also going to pull it to the side, because remember you want to get tension in this direction as well. Just like we did on the other side, remember we just pulled it directly sideways. This time you want to take the tension out lengthways, add tension lengthways, but then also sideways as well. So we're going to grab it just past the 6-inch mark here, pull it straight towards you, and then also to the side, and then we're going to get a staple in there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then what we're going to do is we need to get that tension in this direction all the way along. You can see it's coming up here between our two staple points. So right in the middle, we're going to pull that nice and tight and then get a couple of staples in the centre.
Yeah.
Yep. So now we've got our 3 sets of staples. We've got a pair of staples here, a pair of staples in the middle, and a pair of staples bang in the centre of the table here. So what we're going to do between each of these staples, we're going to do exactly the same thing. Pull, staple, and in this gap here, right in the middle, pull and staple. And then it's just a matter of filling in the gaps. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing in the middle there, give that bit of a pull. This is in between each of the staples. Then we're just going to fill in the whole lot. So we've got here to here completely stapled. And then we're going to repeat that on the opposite side. So next what you want to do is come back to your corner, and we're just going to pull it tight over into this corner in this direction here. I'm going to put a couple of holding staples just in here. So you want to go around the table and repeat that process on your 4 corners, pulling it in nice and tight. 2 holding staples just here, and this is only on the ends of the tables, not on the sides. So what we want to do now is either side the pocket here, just pull about an inch or so, not ridiculously tight, pull it in towards the centre of the pocket. We'll do the same on the other side. What we're trying to do is end up with a little bit of surplus material in the pocket, which makes it easier for us to finish the pocket. So the next stage, what we want to do is pull the cloth into the pocket, and we want to get a staple in the centre as low as you can onto the wood support. So now, using some good scissors or a knife, you want to make your first cut up towards the staple. So next what we're going to do is we're going to pull it again, trying to get rid of any creases or wrinkles we have across the top edge here. Pull that down about halfway between the two, and we're going to get a staple down again as low as you can down here. And once your second staple's in, you want to cut another slot towards that staple, just to help relieve the pressure as we go along. Now I'm going to pull one final one into the corner on this side, just in here. And then again, we'll cut another little tag in towards that staple. So now we just get ourselves underneath, and we're just going to make sure we got plenty of staples and all of these little tabs are nice and secured. Okay, so now we're happy that everything's nicely secured underneath. You can actually go ahead and remove these staples in the face. And if you're happy with that at that stage, then that is job done. Unfortunately on this particular one, we had to redo this one because the staple pulled out, and so we have a visible little cut, and because it's the type of material it is, it's gone quite frayed. So what we'll do on this particular one, we'll do the little patch up trick, so we'll show you that next. But if you're happy with the finish, you can remove those facing staples and that would be job done. So next I'm just going to go around to the corners and pop out these little 2 holding ones. This is that little kind of 6-inch gap at the end. These little 2 holding ones in the corners, going to get all those removed. Now because we've released the corner pins, you can see we've got some gathering just here. So next we're going to start to pull in the corner pockets. This is the end of the table right here. This is one of the sides of the tables, and what you want to do is you're going to pull it diagonally. That's going to pull out any creases around your centre pockets there. A nice strong stretch, but then before you staple it, so you're going to put a nice stretch on it, you're also going to put a bit of a pull there, and that's where you want to get your staples in. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we now need to put tension in directly across. We've pulled it into the corners. Now we need tension directly in this direction. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this forward a little bit. You don't want to pull this too much because it's not attached to the other side. If you pull it too much, what will happen is you're going to move all the material here, and you're probably going to end up starting to get little, yeah, there you can just, I don't know whether you saw that come up then. If you pull it too much, you're just starting to get a little wrinkle pull up there. So you don't want to pull it too much, just pull it so it's taut. So I'm going to grab in the middle first of all, put a couple of staples in there, and then I'm just going to follow along, and I'll probably put one about every kind of 4 to 6 inches at this stage. You don't need to complete them all, we can come around and do that in a minute. It's now coming to the centre on the opposite side. You're going to go try and get a nice pull this time, and get some staples in here. When you're doing this, just keep an eye on the pockets. Make sure you're not generating any creases as you go. So next, pulling halfway between the two again, get nice tension on it, and get a couple more staples in there. So I've got the staples in both sides on this half of the table. You can see we've got our about 6 inches apart sets of staples, so we can go along at the end and just get that tiny last bit of tension in and fill in these gaps. Okay, extra pull. Come back. Then next we're going to cut our line directly towards the first staple, again ending a little bit short of the staple, exactly the same as the side pockets. So next I'm just going to cut an extra slot into each side, just so I've got a bit more control for pulling it underneath at different angles. So next I'm just going to go underneath, get some more staples in there, make sure that nothing's going to come out. And once I've done that, again, if you're happy with the finish that you've got here, you can remove the face staples, and that would be job done. Alternatively, if you want to tidy it up a little bit, obviously because we've got this extra section here, we've got the visible cuts here, so we're definitely going to put in a little repair section on here just to make it look really nice and tidy. So again, if you want to do that, then do that. If not, then you're finished. So next stage, we can just tidy up the corners here. A bit of a fold in them. Fold it over, put a couple of staples in there. So next, you just want to cut off your excess material so it doesn't show once you've got your rails fitted, and just follow that all the way around the entire table. And again, when you come to your pockets, you're doing exactly the same thing, getting a feel for where the wood is. Going to be a little bit thicker on the pockets. If you want to kind of cut bits off, that's fine. You can kind of see what you're doing. So to attach our rails to the playing surface here, we've got bolts that pass through up from the underneath, and they actually screw into these holes. So when we look up underneath, it makes it nice and simple for us. So we've got this big cutout in the wood and a hole right there in the slate. As we look along to the one side, we've got another one just before the pocket, coming back to the middle, and then to the other side, another one of these right here. So these are the three. So our center one is going to be this hole right there. So one important thing to note is there are a couple of different types of rail corners. This end here, you can see we've got quite an extreme angle, almost like a 45-degree angle. That's one of your corner pockets. But on the other end, if I just flip this over quickly for you, you can see this is one of the side pockets, and you have a much smaller angle on your side pockets. So you want to grab yourself a staple remover and just carefully work under the edges of these staples, just nice and slowly, do it safely, just so you can just get it enough so you can get some pliers on it, and we'll pull it out with some pliers in a second. You don't need to completely remove it. So also note there'll be some staples here on the end of the rail, and obviously these need to be removed as well. Now just grab yourself some pliers and just pull all of the staples out by pulling directly upwards. So with our staples all removed, we can just go ahead and fold the cloth down out of the way. And one thing to point out is just across the front edge here, the edge nearest to you on the wood here, it's actually got this slightly indented section that sits a little bit lower, and that's designed as the kind of strip in which you place your staples. So next we'll just flip this over, and we'll have a look at this from the other side. So fold back the cloth, and what I want to show you here is the feather strip. So the feather strip is this little kind of section of wood just here, and the way that it works is the cloth is actually folded around this strip, and then the strip is pressed into a groove that's on the rail, and that's what holds the cloth in place. Okay, so for the removal of the feather strip, what you want to try and do is lift it up from the end. It can be a little bit tricky. You can pull on the cloth and lift it. This one's, yes, it's moving, but it is in there quite tight. So to help me get it started, just grab a flathead screwdriver, just carefully place that in from the end, and we'll use that as a lever just to help get this started. Yeah, you can see it starting to come now. So just keep that going from one end all the way along to the other. Yeah, and there we go. So that is the feather strip removed. So if we take a quick look at the feather strip here, when you drop it into the slot, you'll notice that there's quite a lot of spare room around it. It kind of rattles around in there. You can see that there's space on either side of it. That's good. You're going to wrap around, the cloth's actually going to wrap around it and take up that space. And so when you jam this in, that's actually what's going to hold it in place. So now grab your rail cloth, and you need to know which is the playing surface and which is the reverse. Manufacturers will very often put a little sticker on one side that shows you where the playing surface is. However, it's quite easy to tell the difference. You can kind of physically look at it. One side looks finished, the other side looks a little bit rough and generally a little bit furry on a worsted cloth like this. So it's usually quite easy to tell the difference between the two. Now what we're going to do is we need to actually lay this with the playing face of the cloth will be facing downward. So now take your feather strip, ensure that you've got the correct end. They've got these angles on them, ensure that the angles kind of line up, and just start to press your cloth down. You don't want too much cloth, too much excess, and if you get it fairly accurate, you can get it so you don't have to cut much off or sometimes anything. at the end. Just go down, start to feed it into the groove, and at this stage we're just pressing it lightly into the groove just to make sure all the material is in the right place and the ends are lining up as we want them to. And then the next thing you want to do is grab yourself a little block of wood, and what you're going to be doing is using the very corner of that wood to help press it in. So we're going to give it a little tap using the corner of the wood. I'm going to do it one kind of half, whatever the width of your wood is. We're doing it by about half of each time to give it a nice firm tap in, not ridiculously hard, just a nice firm tap just to help get that feather strip sunk down nice and low, so we've got a nice solid lock on the cloth. So next you'll find you've got a little bit of a cloth kind of overhanging the gap here, and this needs to be trimmed back to get a nice tidy finish. And just with nice control, just gently go along and just start to trim that. So next we've got to make a small cut to the ends of the cloth here, because we're going to be doing a fold at the end of the process. And right here where the feather strip is, you can see that kind of ends at almost a 45-degree angle. What we want to do is we're going to cut that almost matches that. So it's like the top of an equilateral triangle, so you're matching the angle that comes up. So what I'm going to do is you can do it with a knife, but it's a little bit trickier to get that cut, especially down in there, so it's very tight. I find it's a little bit easier to use good fabric scissors. And all you want to do is get in there and, like I said, match the angle on the opposite side and just get it in. Just do it nice and carefully, get it in as tight as you can, and then once you're in there you're just going to nip off the excess material. So basically you're cutting out a very small triangle out of the cloth. And then when we're ready, what we can do is just go ahead and gently turn this cloth over. So you now should have the playing side up. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to pull this material up, and we are going to get a staple in the middle just to hold the material in place. When you pull it up, you want to pull it up fairly firmly and get that staple in. What you don't want to do is you don't want to pull it up ridiculously hard. You're not trying to stretch the cloth like you're putting it on the table. It doesn't need to be that tight. But it does need to be fairly firm, and you don't want to make it too tight because it can actually deaden the action of the rubber, make you feel like you've got dead spots in the rubber. So you want to pull it up fairly firmly, but not ridiculously tightly, and then we're going to get a staple bang in the middle. So when you're ready, grab your staple gun, pull it up from the centre. You're going to put a staple bang in the middle of the indented section across the front there. So next, looking at one of the ends, you've got the rubber section on the end here. What you want to do is fold the cloth over. When you do this, you're looking to pull it directly straight in relation to the corner, not to either side, but straight up on 90 degrees parallel to kind of that corner there. You pull it straight up. So we're going to pull it, stretch it up fairly tight, similar sort of tightness again, one staple right at the top in there. So with our first staple in place, we can look at making a series of staples down this edge. Now when you come to running the staples down here, you want to run them all in the same direction as this one. So you're shooting them all in this way. What you don't want to do is kind of be tempted to turn the stapler around and start stapling that way. All the staples should run in exactly the same direction all the way across the rail. Okay, so as we work our way down the material, what we're looking to do is actually pull it up and across. We're actually trying to generate these little creases in it, and then we're going to try and trap these creases using a staple. And so each time we're going to add a crease, then a staple, then another crease, then a staple, working our way back round to the corner. So a spare set of hands can come in very handy, especially on these worsted cloths. They're quite hard to work with. So I'm going to get my partner to come in here. She's more dexterous with this than I am. So what you want to do is create a small crease and then place a staple across that crease, so you kind of lock that crease into place. And you just want to keep repeating this process, working your way down to the corner. What you're actually trying to do whilst you're doing this process here, you're actually trying to remove the excess material that's going to be that kind of exists around that corner. So you're getting it tighter and tighter with each one of these folds, you're getting it tighter and tighter as you work back towards the corner of the rail. So you should come to the point when you get to the corner where you've gathered enough material that you can just pull it straight up and start to staple it as normal. So you can see the corner is complete, and so you can just continue along now and staple the remainder. So just grab your staple gun and be careful not to get any ripples on the face here. You should be able to kind of pull it and direct it, and you want to do your staples kind of about 1.5 inches apart, something like that. And when you're pulling this cloth, don't pull it directly upward. You see I'm kind of pulling it slightly behind where I'm stapling, and I'm actually pulling it diagonally backwards rather than straight up, because this is a worsted cloth. It can be a little bit unforgiving. Again, trying not to pull too hard as you do this process. So now we can go ahead and just flip the rail over, and just have a little double check of your feather strip and make sure it's sitting in and it feels level across the edge there. Doesn't matter kind of how much it's indented, it's more that it's even across the entire surface. Have a little feel across the surface and make sure you're happy with the depth of that feather strip. So next we want to have a look at finishing the ends of the rails. Remember, of course, you've got a big hole in the middle of the end here, which is where your pockets lugs are going to fit into. So we want to avoid that when we're stapling. This is where we made that little cutout earlier, that little triangular cutout. And what that allows us to do now, it allows us to fold that section under. This will give us a nice tidy finish. We're just going to fold that section underneath, and then once that's folded, just going to pull the whole thing up. Then we're going to get a couple of staples in just below the hole on the end here. So just place a couple of staples in on the end there, avoiding the hole, just like that. And then what we want to do is obviously we're going to flip the whole thing over and repeat the exact same process on the opposite side. So you're going to fold that down out of the way so it's nice and neat and tidy. Pull that up, and again trying to get a couple of staples in whilst making sure that you avoid the hole there. So we're going to pull it fairly tight, and 2 staples below the hole. So now we need to have a look at trimming off the excess fabric. Now you can do it with a knife. You have to be a little bit careful. This worsted cloth doesn't cut very well with a knife. It tends to fray quite easily. If it's napped, it will cut quite easily. I prefer to use scissors whilst doing this, especially on this type of cloth. It's a little bit harder to cut because obviously we have the gathered material here. Just follow that along, making sure you're getting it all inside the little indented section on the front. Just take that off across to the corner. And on the very end, you just literally want to snip it off just above the staples there, and you want to ensure that the hole for your pockets remains unobstructed. Okay, so now moving on to one of the side rails. The end rails obviously have the 2 corner pockets. The side rails have a combination of a corner pocket and a side pocket, so that's what we need to look at first. So we've repeated the process exactly the same. We started by putting 1 staple in the centre, and then we worked the corner exactly the same as we just showed you. This is a standard, this is a corner pocket right here. And then what we're going to do now is going to work back to what is the centre pocket. Now it's a little bit easier, the first process anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pulling up material, popping the staples, dot them all the way along until I get a staple nice and close to the edge right here. So I'm going to staple that whole run, and then we'll move on to the next stage. And just a quick note, what we've done here is we've done exactly the same cut, that little triangle shaped cut. I've done exactly the same in here, again matching the angle. So it's a much shallower angle this time. So for your side pocket, we've actually got a different type of fold that we're going to do. And the other thing you can do with your excess material just here, you want to keep some of this, depending on how much you've got. So we're going to add a couple of staples, making sure that we're in this little kind of designated staple zone. So I'm just going to put an extra couple of staples just in here before I start to trim out a little bit just here. So I'm just going to trim a little bit out of here just for now, just so we haven't got too much of a build up of material, too many layers. So what we're looking to do is to push this material in, get in nice and tight to the corner here, and we're looking to bring this up nice and tight. And what we're looking for is a nice tight fold that follows as close to that line as possible. You can see I'm just off of it, so I'm actually going to refold that, see if I can get it a little bit closer. But that's what we want, and that's why I said it's so important to focus on this little corner here. So I'm going to reattempt that, hopefully get that a tiny bit better. For good measure, I like to put an extra one in that bridges this gap between the two. Keep that down nice and tight. So next, looking on the end, this is the bit where we cut the little cutout. So actually want to fold that underneath. And you're going to pull that down straight and get a couple of staples in just below your hole. So now we can trim it back. So just go just above your staples. Again, you can do this with a knife or with good quality fabric scissors. And again, just above your staples, back to the corner. And then you can just go ahead and you can follow this down and trim that off. And then obviously when you get to the other end, it's going to be exactly the same trimming as you did on the standard corner pockets. So next stage, we're going to be attaching the rails to the table. Now to do this, we're going to set it up upside down first of all, and get all the pockets attached. And you tend to do this in two halves, so we're going to concentrate on one half first of all. So we're going to connect the end rail into the two corner pockets, two side rails onto two centre pockets, and that will be one half, and then the other half will be the rail, the two corner pockets and the two rails. So your centre pockets get attached onto kind of one of the halves, and then you join them together once they're turned over. Now when you come to lay these out, remember you're going to be turning them over. So if you have a specific order that these were removed on, you want to match the order, remember that's going to be reversed. So for example, when I come and put my side rail on, this isn't a side rail, and I place it on upside down, when I then turn it over, it's actually going to be on the opposite side of the table. So work it out before you lay it out, so whichever one you want on that side of the table goes here, and vice versa. Obviously the end ones remain the same, but you've got to remember there is a head to the table as well, which is the one with the logo. You should have a logo on the head rail, and also at the head of the table on the actual framework as well. Just bear that in mind. When you turn it over, it's going to be on the opposite side of the table. And likewise, when you come to fit the pockets, remember that these are going to be flipped the opposite way around when you turn this assembly over as well. So again, if you've got specific locations that you need them to end up in, make sure that you fit them in the reverse order, ready to be flipped. Now the standard way that these pockets work is they usually have a little metal lug which has got a threaded hole in the middle of it. And in the ends of your rails here, you have a large hole there, and you have a smaller hole in the top. So basically this lug slides into the hole, and then you're going to feed a screw down that goes through the wood there and screws into this hole right here. So when you're putting them together, make sure that nothing's getting jammed in this little gap in here. What you want to do is you may have to kind of manipulate the rails a little bit of an angle to sometimes get them in. You see we're slightly off on this one, so we'll have to adjust the angles a little bit to kind of get that in. Once it's in, you've got the thread started, then you can kind of relax it, and it should kind of fall back into place. And so here you can see we've already built the first half ready for turning over, remembering that this rail is going to be over there, and same with the pockets. So as you can see, we've now flipped these 3 rails, including the centre pockets. So what we're going to do next is we're going to flip the remaining 3 over and join them together. And when you put these last 2 screws in, they have to be screwed in from underneath. So we'll show that to you in just a second. But before that, let's get these flipped. Now we just want to get the lugs lined up again. Remember, this is going to be attached from the underside, so now I'm going to do exactly the same over on the other centre corner, centre pocket. Okay, now before we attempt to put the screw in, we're going to have to do a little bit of manipulation to screw it in from the underneath. So before I do that, I'm actually going to put a rail bolt in at the end in the centre of the section that has the centre pockets, basically the first section that we turned over, the one that has the centre pockets already attached. So I'm just going to put that rail bolt on it just so we don't accidentally start pushing things off of the end of the table. So if you come underneath, this is the end centre rail. If you manipulate the rail, you can kind of see where it needs to be to get it lined up. So just manipulate it, get it where you want it, and we're going to hand tighten in one of the bolts. So now we need to get access to the screw hole to be able to put this in. Now what we've done is we've put a bolt temporarily in the far rail over in that corner, so that's going to allow us to manipulate, basically swing this a little bit to get this in. So what we'll do is we'll swing the whole of the kind of framework of the rails to one side to expose that, and then we can do the same over in the other direction. Now I've got all of the pocket screws connected. What we're going to do now is go to the underside of the rails and start putting in all of the rail bolts. At this stage you're just going to get them started, you're not going to fully tighten them. So I'm going to go around the whole table and get all of these rail bolts inserted but not fully tightened just yet. So we now have all of the rail bolts inserted, and they're just screwed in just to finger tightness. None of them are particularly tight. And what you'll notice at this stage is that you still have a surprising amount of movement in these rails. And so what we want to do is actually want to get these squared up before we screw these on. This is a very important step, and it seems to be overlooked. Did some research on YouTube. I couldn't find any other video that covers this section for some reason. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at why it's important to get this square, and then we're going to give you a few tips on how you can get this squared up so you're happy with it before you tighten those bolts and lock them down into their final location. Okay, the reason why it's so important to get these aligned is obviously if you don't, they're kind of going to be out of square. For example, I push that all the way forward, so you've got quite a lot of movement there. If I push that all the way forward, you'd be almost creating two kind of outward angles, and likewise if I pull it all the way backward, you could be creating two inward angles. And obviously what you want is you want them to be perfectly square all the way down, so it really is important that you don't kind of skip this step. Okay, so a good place to start when you're centering these up is to have a look at the centre pockets. If you approximate the where the centre of this should be, and check that it looks like it's lining up with the centre here. Additionally, if you kind of put your eye dead centre, you should be able to see, you can just see it here, this corner kind of comes down a little bit further than this one on this side. And I can see it's slightly off the centre. So it's hard to get the camera 100% straight when you're doing it with your own eye. It kind of makes sense. What you want to try and do is get that aligned to there, centre to centre, all the way down, and make sure that when you're looking at it dead straight, that it looks like you've got an even drop on either side of the pocket. Come around to the other side and do exactly the same thing. Just going to line this up by eye, centre to centre, even on both sides. There, so that's our starting point. So next I want to get an idea how straight these two rails are in relation to one another. As I mentioned before, what you don't want is them either pointing both slightly backward or both slightly inwards. That's going to throw the angles off on the table. So I'm going to use my, you need a kind of a long rule. I'm going to be using my long spirit level for this. I'm just going to do a couple of checks just to see how straight this is and adjust if required. So you need that straight edge, and you just want to look at the straight edges that are on the table. So I'm actually looking at this edge here where the wood finishes. Can be more accurate than the rubber. The rubber is a flexible product, whereas the wood isn't. That's actually looking pretty good. Yeah, maybe a millimetre out. And then in addition to that, what you can do is you can check the rubber as well. But remember, the rubber isn't as likely to be as accurate, but if it is off by a fair amount, you will see it on the rubbers as well, so it's worth double checking there as well. What you're looking for is a nice flat surface across both rails. Then come around to the opposite side of the table and do exactly the same thing on this side as well. And another thing you can do to help ensure that your rails are getting squared up evenly on both sides is to have a look at your centre pockets and to take a physical measurement with a tape measure from the edge of the slate here up to the back of the pocket just here. So grab your tape measure, put it so it's in the centre here, in the centre there, take a note of that measurement right there, and then obviously go around to the other side of the pool table and take that measurement, and obviously what you're aiming to do is get it identical on both sides of the table. So for the next check, I've got a large square here, and I'm just going to check that against the edges, again using the wood of the rails as my guide. Okay, so I can see here that we are a little bit out. I'm happy with the line here, I'm happy with it here. If you come to the end here, you can see we're actually overlapping a little bit onto the wood. So we're slightly out of square, so we're going to have to make a little bit of an adjustment. I'm just going to check the opposite corner before we make our adjustment to make sure we're getting the same reading on both sides. Yeah, so we can see we're quite a long way out of square here. You see down this line here, we've got that lined up really nice. Then as we come down this line here, it starts perfect here, and look at the gap that we've got as we run off across towards the end there. So when you're checking these corners to see if they're out of square, check the first corner and kind of work out, okay, well to get that square it would have to move in this direction, and then flip it over, check the other corner, and hopefully that should give you the same indication that moving it in that direction would also fix that problem. What you want to do once you've found your where it's not square, you want to try and leave your centre pockets as they are and kind of shift the rest of it around. So what we're going to do, if you want to make an adjustment here, you're going to shift both of these end rails sideways or sideways in this manner, and this will obviously this will change this angle accordingly. So that's the kind of the plan, is we're going to leave the centre pockets where they are. You will need to readjust those at the end, fine tune those again, but you're just going to try and shift the whole of these two pockets side to side until we get them square on both sides. Okay, so now we've made our adjustments, we've shifted the ends and we've got them squared up on both sides. We need to go back and recheck our centre pockets. So this is just kind of a process of fine tuning really. You want to get these so that all of the levels are as square and as accurate as you can, so that you're happy with it, that it's as good as it can be. So just going to repeat the process. So I'll do this, I'll do it against the rubbers as well, and I will measure in the pockets. And I'll also go around and I'll do the same measurement on the corner pockets as well. Make sure we've got the same kind of depth of drop on each of the corner pockets. It might not ever get 100% square, but you want to try and get it 99% square. Get it as square as you possibly can. So just spend a bit of time. Now's the time to do it. You don't, when you're playing the game, you don't want your angles to be off. So just spend 10-15 minutes, half an hour. It doesn't matter. As long as it takes, now's your opportunity to get it right. So just keep going around until you're happy with it. Once we've gone around the table and we know that we're happy, we're going to do up all of the rail bolts. Now as you do this, you want to kind of clamp each section. You want to ensure that it doesn't move. So give it a bit of a push down as you slowly tighten these up. Get them so it's slightly tight, then go to the opposite end on the same rail and get that slightly tight, and then do the same in the middle, and then you can tighten all three fully. Okay, so now I have all three bolts for this rail. That rail is locked solidly in place. So what I'm going to do is go to the other side of the pocket, clamp this, start here, again get that fairly tight, go to the other end, get that fairly tight, back to the middle, fairly tight, and then tighten them all properly. Just work around the whole table in a circle until you get back to where you started. So next on our Brunswick heirloom table, we actually have these little wooden trims. I've left a couple of the nails in that were removed before. So it's got 4 little nail holes, and this trim basically just covers up the wood on this end. So once we kind of flush with the bottom, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the original holes. And I can give those a little bit more of a tap in gently with the hammer. I can put two extra nails in just there. And that's all these little bits of trim for, just to tidy up that corner. Obviously your pocket will hang down in front of this, so you won't see this section here. Again, keeps it all nice and tidy so you don't see the end of the wood here. So next you want to come to the underside of the table. We're going to be straightening up and attaching these pockets. You'll see these pockets have got these little arms on them, and you should find they've got a little screw hole in them. If yours are brand new and they don't have the little screw hole in the end, what you can do is just get yourself a piece of a block of scrap wood, put that in there and get a drill bit and just drill a little hole through it. So you end up with the hole ready for mounting. So what you'll find is you'll have 2 near the front, so those are going to be right near the front edge just here. Then your other two, the rest of them are kind of attached as they go around in kind of even spacing. What you'll find is the ones that are right at the back, these ones right here, they often feed through a little hole, and so you'll have to actually go under the table and zip those on from the underside here if you can't get the access. But that's what we need to do, is just go around. So you start with that one and the same one on the other side. That's going to be near flush with the end of the table, and just work these round, spacing them evenly and zipping a little screw into each one. Okay, so next on our particular pool table we have these little decorative panels that go along and hide the size of the slate and the cloth and everything. Depending on your type of pool table, sometimes the rails have this inbuilt, so the rails are kind of a big 90-degree section. These have it as a separate plate. So what we have is these little brackets that are going to be attached onto the rear there. And basically these fit up inside here like that, and that kind of gives you your finished look. So during the dismantling of this table, we actually, before we took these brackets off, we actually marked these brackets to make them easier to put back on. So we're going to zip the brackets back on, and hopefully when we offer it up to the table, these holes on this side will align, and we can put it back exactly as it was before disassembly. So that's one fitted. So obviously what we're going to do now is just go around and repeat the process all the way around the table. So there we have it, guys. Our pool table is now fully installed. As you would have seen throughout this video, we've shown you how to do each and every single part of the process. We've also produced videos on each of those processes that goes into even more detail. So if you're building one yourself and there's any bits that you get stuck on and you need some more information on, we'll have a load more links for you in the descriptive text below this video, so you can go down and you can check out the separate videos if you want to get into some of the really fine detail and get a bit more of a helping hand if you're doing an installation yourself. If this video has been helpful or enjoyable, could you, before you leave us, please give us a like on YouTube, and if you could hit the subscribe button, it really helps us out, probably far more than you'd realise. That really would be appreciated. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you again on another video. Thanks, guys.